Welcome to Housing Developments. I'm Jim Tobin.
And I'm Paul Lopez.
Yeah, welcome. Another edition.
Back home.
Back home. We're back home instead of being on the road last week in Cincinnati at the Association Management Conference.
New snazzy set.
I know, right? Right. There we are, sitting right in that building right there.
That's right.
Very awesome. Yeah, and thanks to the whole crew. Producer Reagan, who's in with us today, Jeff Bankert, and the whole production team for having a pretty cool set.
Yeah, absolutely. Summer is almost out of the long hot summer. That's right.
Long hot summer.
And of course that means that Congress should be back in session next week.
Yep.
Right?
Yep. Yeah. For those of you who have been dealing with your members of Congress over August back home, you get to send them back to us. So September, pretty consequential month. It seems like more and more of them are consequential these days. But this one, because we're hurtling towards the end of the fiscal year, the federal fiscal year on September 30th, a lot of consternation about, is the government going to shut down? Is it going to get funded? How does it get funded? How long does it get funded? The right wing of the House Republicans, they're playing hardball. They want significant reduction in federal appropriations. There's a stack of appropriations bills that have made their way to the House floor, but most, if not all, haven't gotten a vote yet. And so we're going to see what's going to happen. Plus, you got a Democratic Senate, Democratic White House. There has to be some compromise, but so far the House conservatives are not playing the compromise game.
Did I hear correctly that they're also trying to tie in the Biden impeachment to this?
Sure, why not? Christmas comes early when you're on Capitol Hill, and so they're trying to buy those 15 or 20 votes. And remember, Speaker McCarthy only has 5 to spare, 4 to spare, and we eventually, my gut tells me, there will be a continuing resolution, at least to get us into the deeper part of the fall, closer to the holidays. Traditionally, the holiday season has provided those jet fumes and the impetus for getting out of town and getting the deal done. We'll see what it looks like. I still think we're going to see cuts, in a lot of accounts that we care about. Of course, the big one we're working on is restoring Job Corps funding that was completely gutted by the House Labor Appropriations Bill.
Right.
So it's going to be a pretty interesting September for us, but we're on it.
That's on the House side. Anything interesting happening on the Senate side?
Nothing interesting ever happens on the Senate side. So for those of you who know, I'm an old House staffer. So Chuck Schumer's trying to play the adult in the room.
That's right.
And he's trying to navigate an appropriations process, which is definitely more congenial over there, and provide those big numbers and those pieces of legislation that a bipartisan group of House members can actually work to pass and get around the blockade of the House conservatives.
Right.
That's Kevin McCarthy's cross to bear.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
times.
Anything housing specific that you see on the legislative side other than Job Corps?
Well, we have a couple opportunities coming up for some hearings. I think we're going to see some housing hearings in September. They're going to get us a chance to spotlight affordability. And housing supply. Yeah. So a lot of spotlight there on housing, especially with interest rates being so high,
right?
Supply being low. This could be a couple of difficult months ahead of us with interest rates where they are. So that's an opportunity for us. Big pieces of housing legislation. I don't think they're quite ready for prime time yet. Appropriations are going to suck all the oxygen out of the room.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Okay, but we did have some interesting news this week. I'll say it, just when you thought it was safe to get back into the waters of the U.S. Thank you. We got a really weird kind of bifurcated decision by the Biden administration, right?
Yeah. Well, that's why we have our special guest here to unbifurcate the decision. Michael Mittelholzer, thanks for joining us today. Talk to us about WOTUS.
Well, first, it's good to be with you guys.
Thank you.
It's back to school and back to WOTUS.
Right.
Where did we leave this? So we left in the spring where we had this great Supreme Court victory and a good legal victory for NAHB, which was a case not focused on the Biden administration WOTUS rule, but on a WOTUS jurisdictional determination to some home builders out in Idaho, the Sackett case. And since that time, 2 things have happened. First, in light of the ruling, EPA and the Corps decided to halt the federal permitting process since about early June. And for our builders and developers, what that has meant is they're unable to begin the permitting process, what's called seeking an approved jurisdictional determination. Basically, it says whether or not a feature on your property is or is not subject to the Clean Water Act. So that's where we've been. Where we think we're about to be is on Tuesday, the agencies unveiled what they call a amended 2023 WOTUS rule. A couple things to note about that. It's not subject to notice and comment. It takes the original 2023 WOTUS rule, which NHB and many other industries were not great fans of, nor Congress. I believe they passed a continuing resolution of disapproval in a bipartisan way. Leave that aside for a moment. Anyhow, so where we are is basically the political leadership of EPA and the Corps took the 2023 rule and sort of a red pen and just redacted the most offending parts. So what does that mean? The good news for us...
Wait,
go ahead.
Can they do that under this expedited rule with no notice and comment? I mean...
So what it's called, Jim, and I had to do a little read up on this too.
Oh, there we go.
So yeah, there'll be a trivial part of this session afterwards. Under the Administrative Procedures Act, agencies can claim a good cause exemption from public notice and comment. But to avail yourself to that, it has to be non-controversial and it has to be substantively similar. Now, what about environmental law is non-controversial, right?
Right.
But nevertheless, they're there. And sort of the Hobbesian choice they put before us and other industry groups is we're not going to restart the federal permitting process until this rulemaking process is done. So it's in your self-interest, NAHB, or broader U.S. economy to just get this done.
Right.
But as a result of that, and that's reflected in the press release that we put out, that meant all the other problems with the Biden administration WOTUS rule can't be addressed. Like, for example, they've intentionally not defined what is a relatively permanent water. And those who have followed the Sackett decision, that's really the key lever the federal government has left. Only things that maintain a relatively permanent connection to another jurisdictional feature are covered in the Clean Water Act. But let's put that aside. What did we get out of the Sackett ruling and out of this direct final rule? It halts the use of what's called a significant nexus test. And all that means for builders and developers is on average, it took the Corps between 6 months to a year to do these analyses, even on individual projects. And what it allowed the federal government to do is to take an otherwise isolated or ephemeral feature located at some distance from what we would typically think is a river, creek, stream, ocean, and claim that there was some connection, some significant nexus between that feature and the otherwise jurisdictional navigable water body. So whether you like it or don't like it, what's been proven over the years that that's been in place is the Corps is incapable of processing permits under that in any reasonable period of time.
So that's wiped out.
That's wiped out. In fact, what the court ruled there unanimously, 9-0, which is kind of rare these days, is there's no legal basis for it under the statute. And yet we've been living under it for about 15 years since Rapano. So that's good to know.
That's good. So that means permits should be moving a little bit faster in that deal with that.
Well, I mean, right? Even broken clocks are right 2 times a day, right? So I think one of the impediments to the permitting process is gone. Whether or not that'll mean the permitting process runs so much quicker remains to be seen. But that's not all we got out of Sackett. The second thing we got out of Sackett is a narrow definition of what's known as an adjacent wetland. In the past, they used terms like neighboring, similarly situated, to capture properties located some distance from a lake, river, pond. In fact, in the Sackett case, they used neighboring there to capture that wetland, and it was located, I don't know, like 600 yards from the actual,
property line.
Yeah,
I would consider some of your rivers 600 yards from me a neighbor. It might be in the zone.
Anyhow, so you get those two things. So now for a wetland to be adjacent, it actually has to physically touch. There has to be a surface water connection. If you remember back in the days of the previous administration, one of the things we always liked about that rule is that we thought it returned us to a day where a builder or developer, he or she could look out on a property themselves and determine what's jurisdictional. Well, with a significant nexus gone and a narrower definition of adjacent, we're a lot closer to that than we ever were before.
But they still didn't address the ephemeral features property, right?
No, in fact, they refused to. And those who have been following this, one of the big reasons why the current administration withdrew the previous administration's rule, other than it was done by the previous administration, which has been a trend writ large, as we've noticed, right, is they claimed it was that exemption for ephemeral features that put at risk the water quality, particularly in more arid states. Think, Arizona, Colorado, et cetera. So anyhow, that's the rationale that they took to get rid of the Trump rule, which had an exclusion for ephemeral features. But yet now with the Sackett case and things that need to maintain a relatively permanent surface water connection, we're a lot closer to that old rule than we ever were before.
So sounds like a pretty good victory then. And so the rule on balance better than the old rule, but still not perfect.
That was literally the question I was going to ask. I mean, no, really. I mean, it seems like it's kind of a mixed bag. I mean, we're always asking for more, regulatory certainty, right?
Right.
That's always what we've been asking for.
Right.
Did this provide it?
Well, I know Mr. Dietz isn't on today's episode, but if I could play the economist on one hand, but the other hand,
yes,
right? So on one hand, yes, we have potentially, but certainly in the view of the courts, a lot more clarity over what waters are subject to the Federal Clean Water Act and need permits than we did before. The question here is now on implementation. So we're dealing with the approach that this administration chose to take, which is we're just going to amend the 2023 rule, leave all those deficiencies and other problems in there to be addressed in another day, and we're just going to go ahead and implement this. The question is now, how do we implement undefined terms like relatively permanent? Clearly, one would argue that ephemeral features, under no reasonable interpretation of relatively permanent, could be regulated. How that's done in the field across 38 core districts across the country, I don't know. And so I think we're going to hear a lot from the members. What we're going to do immediately, and we've already started this, is reaching out through the membership to our actual wetland consultants across the country and trying to get an early warning once they restart the permitting process, restart the AJD process to see how this is being implemented. And then the other issue that we have here is, of course, that 2023 rule has already been enjoined or prevented from being implemented by a number of federal courts. Right. So even though the administration talks about a durable wetland rule, this rule is currently enforced in less than half the states. So 27 states, this rule never applied. And that was actually, frankly, through litigation that NAHB and other industry groups shepherded through. So what that means, we believe, is this amended 2023 rule will apply in 23 states. And yes, up on nhb.org, we have a map /WOTUS where you can, who's your WOTUS?
Right. WOTUS, right.
And then, in addition, in those remaining states, we expect to see guidance from the agencies reflecting the fact that, Sackett applies nationwide and applies immediately. So we don't anticipate, and in fact, it would be quite easy for our friends in our legal advocacy group to remedy. Significant nexus has gone nationwide. We don't need to wait for EPA and the Corps to finalize this amended rule to make that happen.
So, so first practical effects to those who've been sidelined since mid-July. We talked at the top. And we talked in our production meeting ahead of this about what's the practical effect for those builders that are waiting on JDs.
Yeah.
What happens to them?
We hope the JD process starts immediately once this is published in the Federal Register. When is it going to be published in the Federal Register? As early as next week.
Okay.
Right.
All right. So that's good news there.
Right.
And then you talked about kind of the two different legal ramifications, right? You kind of touched on it. So practically, where do we go? Are we going to be back in litigation?
What are our next steps? Right?
Yeah, right. Are we going to litigate over this this new amended rule? Are we going to let it? What kind of crystal ball it out 6 months to a year? Where are we when it comes to waters of the U.S.?
Yeah, well, I think where we want to be, obviously, is we don't want to see any more halting in the permitting process, at all, right? For the reasons you guys just talked about, the lack of available building lots and everything else. We need to see how the Corps implements this new regulation, and specifically with regard to relatively permanent features versus ephemeral features, recognizing there's not that exclusion like we had under the old WOTUS rule for ephemeral features. But I think actually the next play, and we talked a little about this before too, we need to be mindful from a federation standpoint, is what the states do.
Yeah.
So now half the states already have state wetland programs, state wetland permitting programs. And in the half that don't, they already have state laws that protect state waters, but they relied upon the Corps permitting process. Mm-hmm. And that's where you get into weird situations like what's unfolding in Colorado. In Colorado, they don't have a state wetland permitting program, but they do have a broad definition of waters of the state that they believe protects intermittent and ephemerals. The way our Colorado builders have dealt with this before is if you get a federal permit, then you're in compliance with your waters of the state definition. But the Colorado State Agency earlier this summer, right after the Sackett decision came out in May, started talking about Sackett gap waters and are asking our members to notify the state prior to doing activities that, remove or grade or cover over ephemeral features, because they may need to get some kind of state approval, but of course there's no permit there. Colorado is just an example.
Right.
So there's roughly half the states where there are no state wetland permitting program, and to see if they either stand up one or don't. But we've also seen states go the other way. North Carolina is an example, right?
Mm-hmm.
North Carolina used to regulate isolated wetlands, and in light of the Sackett decision, they decided not to, and they changed it. Right. So I think we're going to see a lot of
sounds like
changes.
more that you kind of generally, right? The haves and have-nots out there, right? There's going to be states that are going to be more favorable to development and moving dirt, and than others. And
so I think we'll have some time, but it's going to require us to adapt on what happens in the federal permitting process. Now that this direct final rule is out there, and once it's published and effective, then I really think it's a question of implementation and how the agencies hopefully can go through the permitting process a little quicker, because they don't have to perform these significant nexus case-by-case determinations. So that doesn't exist anymore.
So maybe the last piece to wrap it up. What are we going to do for our members, right? So obviously, huge legal and regulatory resources. Sounds like there may be where we might be starting to fight this on a state-by-state basis in the state legislatures, like you say. So state and local advocacy help or legal action help. But just let our members know that we're here as a resource for them as we kind of unpack what this means and what the future holds. We want to make sure that we're there as a resource.
Yeah, I think there's three prongs that we're working on right here. Obviously, the litigation that NAHB's entered into on the 2023 rule is still there.
Yep.
And, Tom Ward can tell you about that. The second one is, we're going to be working with the agencies and equally important, our primary wetland consultants that serve our membership in the field to really tease out how this rule is being implemented and whether or not the lack of a definition of relatively permanent is something that is gumming up the permitting process or not. And then I think the third thing we need to do, and we're going to start that at our fall leadership meeting, is revisit our conversation and policy on wetlands, recognizing this Supreme Court case, and also recognizing the role the states have in the wetland permitting process, and whether, to your point, whether we need to start to pivot and play a more active role with our state associations on what the states decide or decide not to do in light of the Sackett ruling and this recent rulemaking.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, well, we're here.
Yeah, bless your heart, Michael. You're going to be a little busy for the next few months/years.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being here.
Joining. Yeah. Really important information to a lot of our members. I know I've been on the road, and I've had many members corner me and say, JDs are completely frozen. What do you think I should do? Oh, if you're getting advice from a former lobbyist, you're in big trouble. But I'm glad we're past this hump. Now JDs will hopefully start moving, and then we're back to developing, and that's really important. So great work, Mike, on behalf of the whole NHB Federation. But I know you've been working on this issue a long time, but never seems like it ends. But great work on it.
It's always a
case, and
it's
great.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks.
All right, well,
that's a lot.
Was that some good news? I'm still trying to figure it out.
I think it's good news.
Let's call it a good news.
Yeah, it's good news.
Speaking of good news, while we were in Cincinnati, obviously one of the big things that we were talking about at AMC was fall leadership meeting.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
And that's coming up in 3 short weeks, I think.
Yeah.
So
speaking of a desert that had a lot of water in the last couple of weeks. Yeah, right. Yeah, so 3 weeks from now, right, and WOTUS will be top of mind. I have no doubt the Leadership Council will tackle this issue in depth, as well as the committee. So, looking forward to seeing everybody.
Yeah, and while we were in Cincy, though, we had the opportunity to speak to Gretchen Gutierrez. She's the EO there in Desert Valley, who is going to be hosting us, right?
She is indeed, yeah. So I'm looking forward to seeing Gretchen, and she's looking forward to welcoming us all out there.
Yeah, so thankfully we had time to sit down and chat with her.
We did.
So here's a little bit of clip of what she had to say.
Yeah. Here we are just about a month out from our fall leadership meeting. So it's our pleasure welcoming Gretchen Gutierrez, who is the EO of Desert Valley's HBA.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Glad to be here.
Yeah. So are you getting a little excited about all this?
We're very excited about it. So both my membership and my leadership are very excited, and we're thrilled that you all are coming to visit us in the desert.
Yeah, well, I've talked to a lot of members who've never been to Palm Springs. I find that hard to believe, quite frankly. But
I don't, actually. We've been getting a lot of calls over the last few weeks from folks from around the country saying, what's the weather going to be like? What do we wear?
Hot.
What do we bring? What can we do?
Yeah.
They're coming obviously for the meetings, but they want to see the area. So we've got a little insider tips and tricks that we've put out for everybody to know things to see and do.
Yeah.
Oh, and where can they find that?
It will be posted shortly, I understand, up on the website along with the registration page. So they'll find it there. We will have a booth at registration. We'll be staffing it. My PWB group will be staffing that as well. And we'll have folks there that can assist people around the valley and help them with restaurant choices, things to do, places to go, things to see.
So let's answer some of these questions then, right? So weather-wise, because that's one, I mean, you're kind of on the shoulder season. So what's the expectation?
We will probably be in the low to mid 90s during the day and the low to mid 80s at night. So it's still a pretty warm season for us at that. September is still pretty warm for us. Yes.
And we're asking people, it's mostly resort casual for the most part, right, Jim?
Yeah, that's what we want to get across, everybody. Gretchen, you and I have been talking about this. It's a resort casual atmosphere. Anyway, right? It's California. It's the Valley, right? So, but for our meetings, which can traditionally trend a little bit more business or business casual, really resort casual. Come be comfy. It's going to be hot.
It's going to be hot, and drag out your Tommy Bahama shirts.
There you go.
Come on out. We are the desert, and it will be, as I say, it will be warm, but pretty much to leave the jackets and ties at home. We tell the ladies leave the pantyhose at home.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
you don't have to necessarily dress up for us. We are definitely a laid back area. Of course, we're a high tourism area.
Yep.
So we definitely tend to dress a lot more casual.
Yeah.
So obviously the focus is the meetings. I mean, we are doing the business of the association, but once those adjourn, what are some of the things that you would recommend people to, look into and see what they can do after hours?
Well, we have a lot of places that'll still be open or just reopening for the start of our season, because our season technically doesn't start for our tourists and our snowbirds till about the end of October. So a lot of places will just be restarting the first part of September.
Okay.
Restaurants, golf courses, etc. On our cheat sheet list, we've given folks the opportunity to look at venues that are relatively close by to the venue. And that way they can choose golf. If they want to go someplace else to play golf, if they want to have dinner off property, they can go someplace there. So there's things like that. The Living Desert, we have a renowned zoo. We have the Palm Springs Air Museum. We have the Art Museum. We have a number of art museums there in town. So some of them are very geographically close. Others are a little bit more of an Uber or car ride to get to them. But there's a lot of things to see and do. And of course, we stay daylight out there until about 8:30 at night. So if they're outside, there's plenty of things to do just even outside. We've got hiking trails. We're close to Joshua Tree National Park. I've already heard from some fellow EOs. They're coming in a little bit early. They want to go up to Joshua Tree and go hiking.
Yeah.
And so we've said, great, here's the entrances to go in and
Bring water.
go. And bring water. I will tell you, a rescue on any of our hiking trails is going to run you about 100K. So you do not want to get off into the weeds, as it were, and do something that you should not be doing. Yeah, it's expensive.
And to put people at ease, because last week you guys got hit by a bunch of storms, but I mean, you guys came out, pretty unscathed for the most part, right?
Pretty unscathed. So Hurricane Hillary came up through the coast of Baja, came right across the Mexican border, San Diego border, et cetera, up through the Gulf. By the time it hit us, we were the most hard-hit region in California, the Palm Springs, Coachella Valley, per se. We were down for about 24 hours with it. It had become a tropical storm by the time it hit us. Ironically, the one neighborhood that had about 5 feet of flooding and mud come through it was my residential neighborhood.
Of course.
The rest of the valley came through relatively unscathed.
Good.
We've had some severe road closures along the western portion of the valley, but our freeway is operational. The airport, most importantly, is operational.
Right.
It was offline for about 15 hours during the storm.
The hotel's fine.
The
everything.
hotel where everyone's staying at, predominantly everyone's at, is fine. They're a little further east. The whole valley took the brunt of the storm, but some of it fared better than others because the middle of the valley is higher than the edges. So the edge that got hit was the western edge, which happens to be the area where my home is. And all of the mud that everyone is seeing on the national news is a block from my house. So I'm going home today to shovel mud from my neighbors to help my neighbors out. But no, for the event, fly to Palm Springs Airport, take a cab, take an Uber, public transportation, rent a car, however you're going to get there. It's about a 20-minute drive from the airport out to the hotel. The hotels are huge. It's a beautiful facility. It's gorgeous. 2 golf courses, lovely venue.
And that's the JW Marriott for
JW Marriott, yes. Big convention space. A lot of conventions come in that particular location. We've used it on occasion for our office. And it's a nice facility. It's a great facility. It came through very unscathed.
Good.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah, that's awesome. I can't wait to get out there. I had a chance to visit this early this spring, right?
You
We
were
out
here
there.
in March.
I
You came
was.
out to see me in March.
Yeah. It was great. Had a great time out there. So looking forward to coming out again in a little different season, but hot.
Yeah.
So that's a lot.
Yeah.
That's a theme.
Yes, it will be hot. It will be hot. Dress accordingly. It will probably be cool in the convention center and in the meeting rooms and things. So, light sweater, light jacket, just because the AC tends to get cranked well high. But once you get outside, it's actually pretty nice in September. So we're hoping we have no windstorms. But other than that, can't predict weather.
A different part of the country. I'm looking forward to seeing it again.
Absolutely.
So
Well, Gretchen Gutierrez, our hostess.
thank you. We're looking forward to seeing y'all in about a month. Actually, it's a little less than a month, I think, at this point.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Excellent.
Thanks
So
for
we'll
joining
say
us.
welcome to California.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gretchen.
Thank you.
Great to hear from Gretchen. Again, you can hear it. She's excited to have us out there.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Going to be hot. You heard her say it. It's going to be hot. Meeting's going to be casual. But I'm looking forward to a great 3 days in Desert Valley, and Desert Valley's HBA, but Palm Springs in particular.
100%.
Yeah, cool.
Well, with that,
All right, until next time. Yeah,
All right.
Good to see you. Have a great rest of August. We'll see you in September.
that's right. I'm Paul Lopez.
And I'm Jim Tobin.
Take
See you
care.
next time.
Bye.